You ever get blamed for something so old, so dusty, so fossilized that you know, instantly, that the person pointing fingers isn't looking for the truth, they're looking for a victim? That's exactly where I was sitting the day our CTO, Gavin, decided to turn me into his personal scapegoat. And the best part? He had no idea the legacy code he was crucifying me for was something I legally owned. Not the company. Not the CTO. Me. Gavin strutted into the engineering bullpen like he was gliding down a runway, blazer too tight, hair too slick, ego too inflated. He loved dramatic entrances, the kind where everyone else had to look up from their screens and pretend he mattered. That morning, he dropped a stack of printouts on my desk like he was a detective slamming down evidence. Ancient code, modules from nearly a decade ago, things written before half the current dev team had even graduated college. This, he announced loud enough for everyone to hear, is the trash that's been slowing down our platform. You're trash. And just like that, he fired me in front of the room. No meeting. No discussion. No due process. Just public humiliation wrapped in corporate performance art. But he didn't know, no one did, that long before I ever worked at this company, back when I was freelancing to keep the lights on, I built that code under my own private license. When the company bought it years later, they bought the right to use it, not the right to own it. And the renewal date? 3 months overdue. So I walked out calmly, badge, laptop, and dignity intact. If Gavin expected tears, panic, bargaining, he got none. I let him have his little victory lap because I knew something he didn't. Without my renewed license, that legacy code he blamed me for was about to become a legal landmine. I spent the next 48 hours quietly reviewing my old contracts, making sure every clause was airtight. Spoiler, they were. I'd written them myself back in my never get screwed over again era. And now they were going to do exactly what they were designed to do, protect me from arrogant executives with god complexes and low technical literacy. A week later, my phone lit up at 2:14 a.m. First the texts. Then the missed calls. Then the emails marked urgent. Apparently, in Gavin's genius attempt to remove my legacy garbage, he'd triggered the part of the codebase that relied on my proprietary modules. The entire backend was paralyzed. Payment processing froze. Shipping logic crashed. Customer accounts locked themselves in a recursive loop that IT couldn't break. And every time they tried to patch or rewrite the affected systems, they got error messages flashing that single, beautiful phrase, license verification required. They didn't have the license. They didn't have the rights. They didn't have anything. Gavin couldn't touch a single line of the system he'd confidently bragged about modernizing. The board, investors, and clients were all breathing down his neck, and he was one step away from being wheeled into the corporate courtyard for a professional firing squad. By noon that day, I had an email from the CEO's direct account, short, desperate, and drenched in corporate panic sweat. They didn't just want me back. They needed me. They needed the license, the access, the knowledge, the very things Gavin had dismissed as outdated, irrelevant, or obsolete. I agreed to meet, but not at the office. I picked a neutral setting, a glass-walled conference room at their legal firm. Gavin looked like he hadn't slept in 50 hours. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a hollowed-out stare that belonged to a man watching his career circle the drain. The CEO tried to smile, tried to pretend this was just a misunderstanding, but I didn't let him wiggle out of it. I slid the contract across the table, the renewal fee, the maintenance fee, the consultation fee, and the reinstatement penalty for unauthorized modification. It was a number so large the room fell silent. Gavin's jaw literally dropped. The CEO swallowed so hard I thought he might choke on his own apology. "We may need some adjustments to the terms," he stammered. I shook my head. "No adjustments. This is the cost of firing the person who understands your infrastructure. This is the cost of blaming me for your CTO's incompetence. Gavin tried to protest, tried to claim he didn't know about the license, but the firm's attorney shut him down with one sentence: ignorance is not a legal defense. They paid every cent. And part of that agreement? Gavin's immediate termination. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even suggest it. The board included it themselves because they finally saw what I'd known for years. He wasn't just incompetent, he was dangerous. I didn't come back as an employee either. I came back as an external consultant with triple the pay, zero managerial oversight, and full control over the rebuild. The team cheered when I walked in. Gavin's office was already empty, cleaned out, sanitized, and stripped of its glass-ego furniture. In the end, the revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't the title. It wasn't even Gavin being escorted out of the building he once ruled like a petty tyrant. The real revenge was watching an entire corporate machine realize that the legacy code they mocked, minimized, and dismissed was the backbone of everything they depended on. My code. My system. My license. And the man who tried to blame me for it. He got shut down harder than the servers he crashed. I didn't hear from Gavin for a while after that, unless you count the rumors. Corporate gossip travels faster than a fiber connection, and his downfall spread through the industry like wildfire. He'd apparently tried to spin the story as a personality clash and internal politics, but the tech world isn't stupid. CTOs talk. VCs talk. Engineering directors talk even louder. And once word got out that he'd crashed a live production system because he didn't understand licensing, every door that might have opened for him slammed shut. One startup reportedly cut an interview short the moment he said his name. Another company didn't even let him finish the first round after calling my old CEO for a reference. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Not because I was trying to rub it in, though I won't pretend there wasn't some satisfaction in watching karma sprint rather than crawl, but because I'd finally gotten the career freedom I'd worked for. The contract work they gave me wasn't busy work. It was real, meaningful architecture. I rebuilt the broken systems piece by piece, moving everything off the antiquated modules while keeping the integrity of the original product. And I did it at my pace, on my terms, with a team that respected the hell out of me because they finally saw the truth. The legacy mess Gavin blamed me for was something he never had the intelligence to understand in the first place. The best part? The CEO treated me differently too. He'd stop by meetings just to listen, take notes, or ask questions he never bothered to ask when I was an employee. It wasn't humility, it was survival instinct. Losing millions in downtime gives a man a whole new appreciation for the people who actually keep the lights on. He even asked if I'd consider coming back full-time, with a director title and a salary big enough to make most engineers drool. I declined. Politely. Because once you've tasted the freedom of owning your work, really owning it, you don't go back to being a corporate pawn in someone else's game. I didn't need a title to prove anything. I didn't need an office with glass walls or a reserved parking spot. I had clients lining up, systems to build, and a reputation built on competence instead of theatrics. But life has a funny way of circling back. A few months later, I ran into Gavin by accident, at a tech conference of all places. He was standing near the back of a small breakout session, dressed in an off-brand suit that didn't fit and holding a guest badge with no company name printed on it. He looked smaller. Deflated. Like someone had turned down the saturation on his personality. He avoided my eyes, but I walked right up to him. I wasn't going to gloat. I wasn't going to mock him. I just wanted to see if he finally understood. Rough months? I asked quietly. He swallowed and nodded. People talk, he muttered. Every interview, they already know. I could have left him there, stewing in the consequences of his own arrogance. But I said something he didn't expect. "Gavin, the problem was never the code. It was that you refused to learn it." He didn't respond. Didn't argue. Didn't deflect. For the first time in the years I'd known him, he was just silent. And that was how I knew he finally understood. I walked away without another word. Not because I'd defeated him. Not because I wanted to rub in the victory. But because there was nothing left to fight. The game was over, and I'd won the moment he underestimated me. The CTO tried to blame me. My license shut him down. And the best revenge, the absolute sweetest part, was that I never had to lift a finger to ruin him. His own arrogance did that for me. Weeks rolled on, and life settled into a rhythm that felt almost surreal compared to the chaos Gavin had dragged me through. I was consulting for 2 other companies now, both referrals from the legal firm that handled the licensing fiasco. Apparently, my name had become synonymous with the engineer who saved a sinking ship because the CTO didn't know what a license agreement was. A strangely flattering legacy, but a lucrative one. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from the CEO again, not panicked this time, not desperate, just respectful. He asked if I could stop by the office for a quick walkthrough of the final migration. When I arrived, everything felt different. Engineers I barely worked with nodded or smiled when I passed. Some whispered that's him, as if I'd pulled off the tech equivalent of landing a fighter jet on a paper runway. Gavin's old office had been repurposed into a quiet work lounge, stripped of every trace of his ego. Someone joked they planned to sage the room just to get rid of the lingering smell of arrogance. But the real surprise came when I walked into the CEO's office. Sitting beside him was the board chair, a woman who'd always been cordial but distant. This time, she shook my hand like she actually meant it. She thanked me for saving the infrastructure from total collapse and for handling the transition with professionalism the company didn't deserve but desperately needed. I didn't need praise. I didn't need recognition. But hearing those words after years of being undervalued, it hit deeper than I expected. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "We want to offer you advisory equity. Not a job. Not a title. A stake. A piece of the company. A literal share of the thing they'd almost destroyed while trying to remove me." I didn't answer right away. I told them I'd review the offer with my attorney. But the moment I walked out the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Vindication. Because the company that once fired me publicly now wanted me permanently tied to their success. Not because they pitied me, or owed me, or feared another meltdown, but because they finally understood my worth. My work. My code. And the foresight I'd had when I created a license that protected me better than any corporate loyalty ever could. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of bourbon, watching the city lights blink like a circuit board humming in the dark. My phone buzzed, another job request, another contract offer, another door opening because of the mess Gavin made. Funny how life works. Sometimes the people who try hardest to destroy you end up building the road you walk to success. I thought of Gavin then, not with anger, not with smugness, but with a strange kind of clarity. He'd always believed power came from titles, authority, corner offices, and the volume of his own voice. But real power? Real influence? Real security? It's built quietly. Line by line. Contract by contract. Choice by choice. And the moment he fired me, he severed his only connection to the very system keeping him afloat. The CTO tried to blame me. My license shut him down. But the truth, the thing that made all the difference, was simple. I didn't win because he failed. I won because I built something he never understood. And that's the kind of victory no one can take away. A few days later, my attorney called with a tone I'd learned to recognize, something between amusement and disbelief. "You're going to want to see this," she said. She forwarded a document, a cease and desist email template the company's legal team had drafted. Not to send to me, to send to vendors who were still using parts of the old codebase without proper licensing. Apparently, once the board dug into the infrastructure Gavin had been tinkering with, they realized the company wasn't the only one skating on thin legal ice. Several third-party contractors had been modifying pieces of the system without proper approval, something Gavin had greenlit verbally because, in his words, "We don't need to worry about that legacy crap." They did now. The irony was beautiful. The outdated modules Gavin mocked were now the most protected, valuable components of the entire ecosystem. The board, now hyper-aware of licensing boundaries, asked if I'd be willing to rewrite the entire rights structure from the ground up. Not just for my code, for the entire engineering organization. I agreed. Not because they needed me. Because they finally understood why they needed me. The new model was airtight. Clean. Bulletproof. Every line documented, every dependency tracked, every external access audited. A system that couldn't be broken by ego-driven decisions or late-night bravado. And the best part? I named it after the principle that saved my career, Ownership Integrity Framework. 2 weeks after deployment, the CEO sent me a simple message: "This should have been our foundation years ago. Thank you." But the universe wasn't done serving poetic justice. I got another familiar email, this time from a venture firm I occasionally consulted for. They said a candidate named Gavin had applied for a CTO role at one of their portfolio startups and listed me as a previous colleague in technical reference. I nearly spit my coffee across my keyboard. He listed me as a reference. My reply was short, factual, and painfully honest. Gavin is charismatic, confident, and outwardly polished. But when pressured, he disregards technical constraints, ignores licensing law, and blames subordinates for his own oversight. He caused millions in losses due to unauthorized code modification and was terminated. Proceed with extreme caution. The venture firm responded within minutes, "Thank you. We'll move forward without him." Not vengeance. Just truth. And truth, I've learned, is the most reliable weapon in any corporate war. A month later, I received one final message, from Gavin himself. No hostility. No excuses. Just 6 words: "I didn't understand what you built." I stared at the text for a while. For the first time, it felt like he wasn't deflecting. He wasn't blaming. He was acknowledging, a step he'd never taken in all the years I'd known him. So I replied, "You didn't have to understand it. You just had to respect it." He never wrote back. As my consulting business grew, as the company stabilized, as my name quietly became associated with tech reliability and architectural integrity, I realized something important: revenge isn't always a dramatic moment. It isn't always a confrontation. It isn't even always intentional. Sometimes revenge is living so far above the people who tried to destroy you that you become a reference point in their failures. The CTO tried to blame me for legacy code. My license shut him down. But the real victory? I outgrew him. I outbuilt him. I outlasted him. And in the end, he finally saw the truth: I was never the legacy. About 3 months after the Gavin incident faded into office folklore, I visited the headquarters for the first time since everything happened. Not for drama. Not for politics. Just a routine strategy meeting with the CEO and the new CTO, a calm, meticulous woman named Rena who seemed allergic to corporate theatrics. My badge still worked, the receptionist still greeted me like I'd never left, and the building still smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cold ambition. But the atmosphere had changed. Engineers who once whispered nervously around me now walked up with candid questions. They wanted to know why I structured a module a certain way, or why I'd made apparently weird architectural choices that suddenly made perfect sense when explained. My answers weren't profound, they were practical, intentional, and designed for longevity rather than ego. One junior dev admitted something that caught me off guard. When Gavin fired you, a lot of us thought maybe you had messed up. But after seeing how everything was built, and how everything almost collapsed without those foundations, we realized you were the only adult in the room. I didn't expect gratitude. But I felt it. Quiet, heavy, real. After the meeting, Rena asked if I could join her for a quick walk through the server floor. She wanted to show me the final phase of the code migration, the part Gavin had always said was too expensive and pointless. It was complete now. Running flawlessly. This wasn't legacy, she said. It was craftsmanship. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. On my way out of the building, I passed Gavin's old office. The glass door had been repainted, his nameplate removed. But something caught my eye, a stack of cardboard boxes in the hall, taped and labeled, archive storage. A custodian was wheeling them toward the elevator. Out of curiosity, I glanced at one of the labels. Former CTO materials, audit completed. Inside the slightly open lid, I could see printed logs. Access violations. Email transcripts. Code snapshots. Evidence of everything he'd broken, ignored, or proudly bulldozed over in his rush to seem visionary. The thing about legacy? You can delete code. You can't delete the consequences. As I stepped into the parking lot, the sun hanging low and gold above the city, my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Someone new had viewed my profile. Someone I didn't expect. Gavin, open to work. I clicked the profile out of morbid curiosity and saw the updated headline, experienced technology leader seeking new opportunities. But what struck me wasn't the headline. It was the endorsement section. The ones he'd bragged about for years, team leadership, visionary strategy, rapid execution, all wiped clean. Replaced by one lonely endorsement added recently, understands the importance of proper licensing. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I closed the app and pocketed my phone. As I drove away, I realized something subtle but profound. The revenge was over. Not because I'd won, though I had. Not because he'd lost, though he did. It was over because I no longer needed him as a reference point, not even as a cautionary tale. His chapter in my story had ended. But mine kept going. And as it turns out, the world is very big when you're no longer carrying the weight of a man who mistook recklessness for innovation. In the end, everything resolved far more quietly, and far more decisively, than the explosive downfall Gavin probably imagined in his nightmares. The final audit came back cleanly. Every component I'd built, every license I'd acquired, every compliance box I'd checked years before anyone cared, they all stood like steel beams in a skyscraper he had only pretended to design. The board formally cleared my name in a memo so dry it could have been printed on sandpaper, but the important part was buried in the last line. All actions taken by former CTO Gavin Hartley were found to be unauthorized. That was their elegant corporate way of saying, he blamed me. He lied. He got caught. I didn't forward the memo to him. I didn't need to. Word travels faster in tech than fiber ever could. My new consulting company grew with an almost poetic symmetry. Clients didn't hire me despite what happened, they hired me because of it. Transparency. Integrity. Future-proof systems. Licensing that actually protects what a company builds instead of burying it under risk. It turns out the industry values those things more than ego-driven CTOs who yell instead of think. Months later, while speaking at a small engineering conference, someone approached me after the talk. I recognized him vaguely, one of Gavin's old inner circle guys, the ones who never challenged him because it was safer not to. He looked uncomfortable, like the truth tasted sour. "We thought you were just old school," he said. "But the code you wrote? It's still running. We had to rebuild everything else." I thanked him. Not because I needed the validation, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Some things built with patience simply outlast things built with pride. As I left the convention center, the evening air felt colder, sharper, cleaner. I stood for a moment watching people spill out onto the street, developers, architects, leaders, all the people who build the invisible world everyone else depends on. That had always been my world. And now? It was finally mine again, without anyone standing over my shoulder, without someone trying to weaponize my work, without a title to chain me down or a superior to cut corners for. I didn't destroy Gavin. I didn't need to. He destroyed himself the moment he underestimated the one thing he never bothered to understand: the value of the person who actually does the work. And me? I moved forward with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Some endings feel like justice. This one felt like peace.